The bus shelter on Calloway Street had one working wall. The other two panels had been shattered sometime in October, probably by the same windstorm that took the transit authority's maintenance schedule with it, and the replacement had never come. What was left was a narrow strip of scratched plexiglass that cut the wind on one side and did nothing about the other three. Marcus Webb noticed the woman the moment he turned the corner. She was sitting on the metal bench with both hands pressed flat against her thighs, her coat pulled tight at the collar with fingers that shook. White hair, pale face, her lips had gone a color that made him stop walking. It was 6:42 in the morning, and the temperature on his phone had read 23 degrees when he'd left the apartment. He had his daughter with him. Cora was 7, tucked against his left side with her chin buried in the wool scarf he'd doubled around her neck before they left. She was watching the old woman the same way Marcus was, not with alarm, but with the particular stillness that children use when they understand something is wrong before an adult has said so. Marcus was 39. He worked a morning shift stocking inventory at a warehouse distribution center on the east side of the city, and he had been taking this exact bus for 11 months. Ever since his car had finally given out and the repair estimate had come back at a number he couldn't look at twice. He knew this shelter. He knew the broken panels. He knew the bench was metal, and that metal in this temperature did not hold warmth. He also knew, just by looking, that the woman had been sitting there for a long time. He walked to the bench. "Ma'am," his voice was quiet. "How long have you been out here?" She looked up. Her eyes were sharp. That was the first thing he noticed. Whatever the cold had taken from her body, it hadn't touched the intelligence behind her eyes. "I'm waiting for my car," she said. Her voice had the measured quality of someone who had spent decades choosing her words carefully. There was a miscommunication about the time. "Do you have a way to reach them?" She looked down at her hands. "My phone needs charging." Marcus reached into his jacket pocket. His own phone was at 62%. He'd checked before leaving because Cora's school had sent a notice the day before about a permission slip he needed to submit. He held it out. "Use mine." She looked at it for a moment. Then she looked at him. Really looked. The way people do when they are trying to understand whether a kindness has a cost. "I don't want to trouble you." "You're not." She took the phone. Her fingers were so stiff she had difficulty with the screen. Marcus watched her struggle, said nothing, and then Cora stepped forward. "I can dial it," Cora said. "If you tell me the number." The woman looked at the child. Something shifted in her face. Not quite a smile, but the first movement toward one. "It starts with a 4, she said. "If you already feel it, that tightening in your chest, hit the like button and subscribe to Hidden Ledger. Drop a comment below and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Because this story is just getting started. And the part they don't see coming? Keep watching." Marcus Webb had learned to do the math in his head before he touched anything in a store. $36 and some change in his wallet. The week's bus passes were already loaded on his card. Cora's lunch account at school had enough for 2 more days. The electric bill had an extension through Thursday, which gave him until his Friday paycheck to make it right. He had been doing this kind of arithmetic for 2 years, since his wife, Diane, had died of a brain aneurysm on a Tuesday morning while Cora was at kindergarten. There had been no warning. There had been no slow goodbye. There had been one phone call from the hospital, and then a world that didn't look the same from the outside, but had been completely, irrevocably rearranged on the inside. The grief had been one thing. The practical weight of grief on a single income was another. He hadn't complained. Not to his coworkers, not to his sister, not to Cora, especially not to Cora, who still sometimes set 2 cups on the table by accident, and then went very quiet when she noticed. The child had enough to carry. He was not going to make her a witness to his. What he had, instead, was a particular kind of attention. The attention of someone who had lost something irreplaceable and learned, afterward, to notice what was still in front of him. That morning, what was in front of him was an elderly woman who was losing warmth faster than the next bus would arrive. The call connected. He heard a man's voice, formal, rattled, and the woman spoke briefly, gave the corner, and handed the phone back. 20 minutes, she said. He was parked on the wrong block. 20 minutes on a metal bench in 23 degrees. Marcus looked at the shelter, the single functioning wall, the wind coming clean from the north, and then at the coffee shop on the other side of the street. Della's. He'd been in twice. He knew the coffee was $6, and he knew he couldn't afford it this morning. but he also knew it was warm inside and they would not remove an elderly woman from a chair. "Come across with us," he said. "We'll wait inside." She looked at him with those sharp eyes again. "You'll miss your bus. There's another one at 7:15. That would make him 12 minutes late to his shift. His supervisor, a man named Ray who kept a personal tally of infractions on a clipboard he didn't try to hide, had already noted Marcus twice for clock-in times. A third mark would cost him a formal warning. A fourth would cost him more than that. Marcus picked up Cora's backpack and offered his elbow to the woman. After a moment, she took it. Her name was Helen. That was all she offered, and Marcus didn't press. She ordered nothing at Della's. Marcus ordered a single small coffee and a hot chocolate for Cora, splitting the cost against what he knew he had. When the drinks arrived, he wrapped both hands around the cup and slid it toward the center of the table. Helen didn't protest. She simply watched his face, the way people watch a person who doesn't know they're being studied. Cora had arranged herself with her elbows on the table and her chin in her hands, regarding Helen with the frank curiosity of someone who had not yet learned to pretend. "Your hair is really long," Cora said. "Cora," Marcus said. "It's all right." Helen touched the silver braid that lay over her shoulder. "It's been long since before your father was born. Did it used to be a different color? Brown, then gray, now this." "My mom had brown hair." Cora said it the way she said most things about her mother now, without dramatic pausing, just as a fact she was offering, the way she might note that the sky was clear. "She died." Marcus looked down at the table. Helen was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry. Dad still brushes my hair the same way she did." Cora glanced at Marcus. He has to look at the picture sometimes to remember which side the part goes on. The corner of Marcus's mouth moved. The left side. He always says that after. Helen watched the two of them. She was holding the cardboard sleeve of the coffee cup Marcus had slid toward her. She hadn't asked for it, but at some point her hands had found it, and she had stopped shaking. There was something in her face that Marcus couldn't quite read. Not pity, not the polite sympathy people performed when they heard about Diane. Something older and quieter, like recognition. "Do you have children?" Marcus asked. "A daughter." She looked at the window. "She is very capable." There was a weight on that word that she did not explain. "She worries about me more than she needs to. That's what children do." Helen looked at him then, a look that held something she wasn't saying. "Some more than others," she said. Outside on the corner, a black car with tinted windows pulled slowly along the block, stopped, reversed, stopped again. Through the coffee shop glass, Marcus could see a driver in a dark uniform, getting out and looking up and down the street, with the particular urgency of someone who has made a significant error and knows it. Helen saw him too. She didn't move immediately. She looked at Marcus's hands around his cup. She looked at Cora, who had begun drawing something on a napkin, a bird, or possibly a very abstract tree. She looked at the cardboard sleeve in her own hands and set it down carefully. "Your bus," she said. "I'll catch the next one. You'll be late to work. I've been late before." She studied him. "What is your full name?" He told her. She repeated it, just once, quietly, as though she were placing it somewhere specific. Then the driver appeared in the doorway of Della's, and the moment broke. The write-up was waiting on Ray's desk when Marcus clocked in. 14 minutes. He had been 14 minutes late, and Ray, who had been counting, who was always counting, had already printed the form and filled in the time with a ballpoint pen that pressed hard enough to leave an indent on the page beneath. Marcus signed it without argument. There was no argument to make. He had been late. The reason was his own, and offering it to Ray felt like a transaction he didn't want to make. Helen's cold hands and Cora's bird drawing on a napkin reduced to justification for a time card. He went to his station and began moving boxes. By noon, a supervisor's assistant came by with a second form, a formal warning, escalated from the write-up, citing a pattern of tardiness over the previous 90 days. Marcus read it twice. The language was precise and impersonal, the kind of language built to be defensible rather than accurate. 3 late clock-ins in 11 months. 2 of them had been by under 10 minutes, on mornings when the earlier bus had simply not come. The third was today. He signed that one too. He knew what a third form would mean. He knew because he had asked, 3 weeks ago, when Ray had pulled him aside with the clipboard, and the attitude of a man delivering news he found personally satisfying. 3 forms in a rolling 12-month period was grounds for termination, regardless of performance record. Marcus had not missed a shift. He had not received a quality complaint. He had trained 2 new hires in the past quarter, and neither of them had been thanked on his behalf. None of that was on Ray's clipboard. That evening, Marcus made dinner. Pasta, because it was what they had, and sat across from Cora at the small table in the kitchen. She had taped her napkin drawing to the refrigerator when they got home. It was a bird. He was fairly certain. "Dad," she said, twirling her fork with great concentration. "Did the lady get warm?" "She got in her car." "Was her car warm?" "I think so." Cora nodded, satisfied with this. "Then, did you get in trouble for being late?" He looked at her. She was 7. She was also the sharpest person he knew. "A little," he said. She put down her fork. "Because of the lady?" "Because I made a choice." "The choice had a consequence." "That's not the lady's fault." Cora thought about this for a long moment. "But you'd make the same choice again." It was not a question. "Yeah," Marcus said. "I would." She picked up her fork and resumed the pasta operation with the focused energy of someone who had received the answer she needed. If this story found its way to you, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Hidden Ledger posts new stories every week, and the one after this one is already waiting. Your support is what keeps the ledger open. The third form arrived 9 days later. He was 12 minutes late. The bus had been delayed by a water main break 2 stops up the line, an event that affected everyone on the route, 3 of whom were also Marcus's co-workers, none of whom received a form because Ray had already stopped watching them. Marcus stood in Ray's office and read the paper and did not raise his voice. Ray sat behind his desk with the clipboard on the surface in front of him, positioned like an instrument rather than a document. "It's a pattern," Ray said. The word pattern had the quality of something he had rehearsed. "The policy exists for a reason. I understand the policy. 3 incidents. The process is clear. I know. I'll need your badge by end of shift." Marcus looked at the man across the desk, a man who had never once asked why, who had filed the forms with the steady satisfaction of someone mistaking procedure for judgment, and said nothing. He stood, thanked Ray in a tone of voice that was perfectly level, and returned to his station. He worked the rest of the shift. He moved the boxes that needed to be moved. He clocked out at 3:15, placed his badge on Ray's desk without knocking, and walked out into the cold. On the bus home, he sat very still. He had $41 in his account. The rent was due in 6 days. Cora's school photos were due in 8, and the notice had said the package was non-refundable. His sister lived 3 states away and had her own children and her own arithmetic. He thought about his options the way he thought about everything now, not with panic, but with the focused, deliberate attention of someone who has learned that panic uses energy he cannot afford to waste. He would apply tomorrow. He had good references from before this job. He had skills. He would figure it out. He had always figured it out. What he let himself feel, just for the length of that bus ride, was the particular loneliness of a man who had done the right thing every day for 2 years and arrived, anyway, at this exact moment. He got home. He made Cora her afternoon snack. He sat at the kitchen table while she told him about her spelling test, and he listened to every word, and he smiled at the right times, and she did not notice anything was wrong. He was very good at that. The call came at 6:48 the following morning. Marcus was standing at the kitchen counter with a bowl of oatmeal he hadn't started eating yet, looking at the job listings on his phone. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Mr. Webb?" The voice was a woman's. Measured, exact. He recognized the cadence before he placed the name. "This is Vivian Holt." He did not recognize the name. "We haven't met," she said, "but I believe you know my mother. Her name is Helen." He was quiet for a moment. "The bus shelter." "Yes." A pause. "She told me what happened. I'd like to speak with you, if you're willing. Not by phone, in person. My office, if that's convenient. Or somewhere of your choosing." "Who are you?" Marcus asked. Not rudely, just precisely. There was a pause that had nothing of embarrassment in it. "I'm the founder and chief executive of Holt Capital Group," Vivian Holt said. "We manage approximately $4.2 billion in assets across 19 commercial properties in this region. My mother is our majority stakeholder." Marcus set down his spoon. "I also understand," she continued, "that you lost your job yesterday, and that the reason you were late, all 3 times, had nothing to do with your work record." He was quiet. "Mr. Webb, I've spent the last 9 days looking into the circumstances of your employment. I've spoken with your former coworkers. I've reviewed your performance evaluations, which are, without exception, excellent. I've also spoken with 3 people who described your supervisor's management practices in terms that are, let me say, of significant interest to our compliance team, since the company you worked for is a tenant of one of our properties. The kitchen was very quiet. The oatmeal steamed. My mother came home from a bus shelter in 23-degree weather, Vivian said. She was holding a cardboard coffee sleeve that wasn't hers, and talking about a man named Marcus Webb and a little girl who drew birds on napkins. My mother does not speak about strangers. She was cold, Marcus said. Anyone would have done the same thing. No, Vivian said, without heat and without sentimentality. They wouldn't. I know this, because in the 40 years I've watched my mother navigate the world. As a businesswoman, as a widow, as a person who has sat in more rooms of power than I can count, the number of people who have offered her genuine, uninterested kindness when they had nothing to gain from it is very, very small. She let that land. I'm not calling to offer you charity, she said. I don't do that. I'm calling because I believe I may have an opportunity that is genuinely appropriate to your skills, and because I think you deserve the chance to hear it. Marcus looked at Cora's napkin bird, still taped to the refrigerator. When, he said. The offices of Holt Capital Group occupied the 14th floor of a building Marcus had passed 100 times without looking up. He came in his best shirt, a button-down he'd ironed the night before, while Cora pretended not to watch from the hallway. He had polished his shoes. He had not bought anything new, because he did not have money to buy anything new, and he had decided some time ago that showing up as himself was the only version of this meeting he knew how to do honestly. The receptionist brought him water and asked if he needed anything else. He said no thank you, and sat very straight in the chair. Vivian Holt came to greet him herself. She was in her early 60s, with her mother's sharp eyes and her mother's deliberate way of speaking, and she shook his hand the way people do when they mean it. She brought him into a conference room with windows that looked out over the city. Selin was there. She was sitting at the far end of the table in a chair that was clearly her chair. The way she sat in it said so, and she had Ruby's yellow scarf around her neck. She looked warmer. She looked like herself, Marcus thought, though he hadn't known her long enough to know what herself looked like in comfort rather than cold. She nodded when he walked in. You ironed your shirt, she said. I did. Sit down, Marcus. He sat. Vivian opened the meeting without preamble. She had reviewed his employment history. She had reviewed the termination. Specifically, she had reviewed it against the lease agreement held by the distribution company, which included a conduct addendum Holt Capital required of all commercial tenants. The addendum existed because Vivian had put it there 3 years ago, after a different tenant had treated a different person badly and gotten away with it. Ray Caldwell's termination of your employment, Vivian said, appears to constitute retaliatory action under our tenant conduct clause. Our legal team is already in correspondence with the company's ownership. Marcus was quiet. That's between us and them, she said. Your part in it is already done. You didn't do anything wrong. The record will show that. He nodded. He had expected something like this, some form of institutional correction, the kind that came too late and solved the wrong problem. He was grateful for it. He was also practical enough to know it didn't cover the rent. Vivian looked at him with her mother's eyes. I have a position, she said. Facilities coordination, specifically, our community property portfolio. 6 buildings in this city that house nonprofit tenants, transitional housing partners, and small businesses that can't otherwise access commercial real estate. The work requires someone who is organized, who communicates clearly, who shows up for people who are depending on them. She paused. My mother tells me you're punctual except when you're choosing not to be. The ghost of a smile crossed Helen's face. The salary is $64,000 to start, Vivian said. Health coverage for you and your daughter, effective 30 days from hire. 4 weeks of paid leave. Marcus had been still throughout all of this. The number, 64,000, was exactly twice what he had been making at the warehouse. He looked at it like a man looking at something he didn't entirely trust yet, the way you look at ice before you put your weight on it. Why? He said. Vivian looked at him steadily. Because I need someone who treats the people in those buildings the way you treated my mother on a street corner in 23 degrees. And because that person is genuinely difficult to find. I've never worked in property management. I know, you'll be trained. Your instincts are not teachable. Your qualifications are. Helen said nothing. She had her hands folded on the table and the yellow scarf around her shoulders, and she was watching Marcus with the patience of someone who already knows the outcome. He thought about Cora at the kitchen table, asking him if the lady got warm. He thought about the form on Ray's desk, with the ballpoint indent on the page beneath. He thought about $41, and a rent due date, and a refrigerator with a napkin bird taped to it. I need to ask one thing, he said. Go ahead. The families in those buildings. The ones in the transitional housing. Will I have authority to actually help them, or will I be filing forms and forwarding calls? Vivian Holt looked at him for a long moment. Then she glanced at her mother. Helen lifted an eyebrow, exactly once. You'll have authority, Vivian said. He took the job. Ray Caldwell received formal notice from Holt Capital's legal team 11 days after Marcus's termination. The notice cited the tenant conduct addendum, documented the pattern of selective discipline, and listed 4 other employees who had raised similar concerns about Ray's management practices over the preceding 18 months. Concerns that had been filed, acknowledged, and quietly shelved. The distribution company's ownership, faced with the prospect of losing the lease on their primary distribution facility, conducted their own review. Ray was not there when Marcus came to collect his last paycheck. Marcus did not ask where he was. On Cora's first day at her new school, the one in the neighborhood they moved to, close enough for her to walk, with a cafeteria that did not require him to monitor the account balance, she came home and told him about the art class. They have real paint, she said, with the reverence reserved for things that matter. Not the watery kind. Yeah? I painted a bird. She set her backpack down with great authority. A real one this time. Miss Albrecht said it was excellent. He made her dinner and listened to everything. Later, after she was asleep, he sat at the kitchen table, which was the same table, just in a different kitchen, a bigger one, and stayed there for a while without his phone, and without the job listings, and without the arithmetic. He thought about a woman on a metal bench in the cold, and the specific stillness of a moment when a person could have walked past and didn't. He had not done it for a reason. That was the thing he kept coming back to, the thing that Vivian Holt had understood before he did. He hadn't helped Helen because he expected anything. He hadn't done the calculation and found it favorable. He had stopped because a woman was cold and he was there, and that was the entire equation. The ledger, it turned out, had been open the whole time. He just hadn't known anyone was watching it. 3 months later, Helen called him on a Sunday morning. I'm going to my daughter's office, she said, and I'd like to stop for coffee first. Della's? He said. If Cora is available to handle the phone dialing. He smiled. She's been practicing. They met on Calloway Street. The bus shelter had been repaired. 2 new plexiglass panels, solid and clear. The metal bench fitted with a wooden slat that didn't conduct cold the way metal did. Marcus had filed the complaint himself, in his 3rd week on the job, through a city facilities contact Vivian had introduced him to. It had taken 11 days to be resolved. He had put it in writing and followed up twice. Helen noticed the panels when she arrived. She stood and looked at them for a moment, then looked at Marcus. You did this. It's a bus shelter, he said. People use it. She turned to Cora, who was wearing her coat and her best boots and looking extremely pleased about both. Your father, Helen said, is a very precise man. Cora nodded. He irons his shirt. I've noticed. They crossed the street together and went into Della's, and Cora sat beside Helen and showed her the bird she had painted in art class. A photograph of it, on Marcus's phone, yellow and red against a blue background. The wings spread like something getting ready to go somewhere. Helen looked at it for a long time. It's excellent, she said. Miss Albrecht said the same thing. Miss Albrecht is correct. Marcus watched the 2 of them, the old woman with the sharp eyes and the 7-year-old with the yellow boots, and felt something settle in his chest that he hadn't realized had been unsettled. Not triumph, not vindication, something quieter than both of those. Cora looked up from the phone at Helen and then at her father and then back at Helen. Did you know, she said, that you were going to help us when you were at the bus stop? Helen considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. No, she said. I only knew I was cold and that someone had stopped. Cora nodded. She picked up her hot chocolate with both hands. That's the same reason Dad stopped, she said. Helen touched the yellow scarf around her shoulders. Borrowed once, returned, sent back again as a gift Cora had insisted on giving. and looked at Marcus over the rim of her coffee cup. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The ledger had been keeping count the whole time. Thank you for staying until the balance was restored. The people who watch to the end are the ones who understand why the ledger matters. If this story stayed with you, the videos on your screen right now are ready to do the same. And if you haven't subscribed yet, the ledger has your name. Hidden Ledger. Every account settles.